Dynamite!
Well, welcome back. It's our third week since the world changed, and we are quarantined, and you are too. So we are starting to produce content from our homes, and this is my kitchen. So welcome. I'm really glad to have you here. We are going to try to make this easy. This is actually a lesson we plan to do anyway because it's a really clean, beautiful way to eat in any season, and we created one that's a winter version of a grain bowl. But we really felt that this week it was a great meal to share with you because it's so customizable. And I know people are having trouble shopping, or they're getting really resourceful and digging into their pantries and finding things, or they're cooking one big meal, but there's a little bit of leftovers. They're not sure what to do with it. And this meal hits all those buttons. So it's a fully customizable meal. The recipe we gave you, you should really think of it more like a formula, not a recipe. I'm going to be cooking my grain bowl using most of the things we listed in that recipe since it is my recipe, but I will tell you that this is a way that I eat with my family at least once a week, and it's different every single time. One thing to keep in mind with grain bowls is color. This is something now more than ever we need happy, colorful food. So when you're picking, if you have the choice, the luxury of picking out what you're going to put on top, think about a range of colors. So for example, in the recipe we call for broccoli, but I noticed I was already using kale and avocado, so for a range of color, I wanted to use cauliflower instead. Also, I had one, so that's the honest truth. For the veg, whatever you have, if you can't go to the store, it could be canned. For the beets, if you have canned beets, go for it. Carrots are great in this. There's really no vegetable that doesn't work for this. If you want to add a protein on top, a boiled egg is a great idea. Maybe you have one leftover chicken leg from last night's dinner and it's not really enough to feed that many people. Well, you could shred that up and that will stretch for 2 or 3 grain bowls. I mean, if you had a fancy steak dinner, sliced steak, maybe you have some tofu cubes, all kinds of ways of adding protein. But remember that some of the grains that I'm going to suggest you use are really full of protein, including quinoa, which is what I'm using. So let's talk about the grains. I'm using quinoa today. And I like quinoa because it cooks up pretty quickly, it's really packed with nutrition, and it's really easy to find. I found when I went to the store there was a lot of rice missing, but there was still a lot of quinoa. I also like millet. Millet is a really great grain that has kind of it sort of has a fresh flavor along with that nutty flavor that grains often have. Both quinoa and millet are gluten-free. Many grains are, such as rice. Polenta from last week, maybe you have some left over. Use it in this. I put a guide to cooking grains in terms of the grain to water ratio plus the cook time. It's in the lesson plan that we emailed you and you can download from the website. And that'll guide you through how to cook the grains. The recipe calls for a cup of cooked grains per person. So there's a lot of elements to this meal in the recipes where you have to bring something already prepared, such as it calls for some toasted sesame seeds. But I'm going to do all that with you today in case you forgot how to do it or need extra help. So the other part of this meal is the toppings. So it's a chance to really exercise what you have in your refrigerator condiment-wise. Maybe you have some mango chutney or lime pickle. Maybe you have some kimchi. I have a fermented carrot and ginger blend that I'm going to put on mine. It makes the meal more colorful, more flavorful, but if you have no condiments, no problem. I also like hot sauce. We use hot sauce a lot at our house. And then in terms of the dressing, we're going to make a tahini dressing today, which I don't think we've ever done in class, and it's a really easy way to make a dressing that you can use for a bunch of things, so consider making a double or even a triple batch. Okay, I think we're ready to go. I just want to go over the lessons that you're going to learn today in case parents are watching and want to know what the takeaways are. One is the grain lesson, how to cook grains. We're going to do some knife skills, cutting the potato or review the avocado. I'm going to go over shredding the kale, which is for the wilted greens. I will also teach you how to make florets out of cauliflower, which you can also do with broccoli. We have a lesson on roasting vegetables, and even though these vegetables all take a different amount of time to roast, we'll do it in one pan staggered. We'll do a dressing lesson, the tahini dressing that I mentioned, and I will teach you another fun thing about flavor when we make something called sparkles. And the big lesson takeaway here is adaptability. So cooking in hard times, cooking with an empty or seemingly empty pantry or fridge, how to make dinner come together when you're really faced with some serious challenges. And I consider one of the challenges now also just feeling uplifted, feeling happy, and feeling cared for. So this meal is also a really great reminder about self-care and taking care of our bodies and eating clean, nutritious, happy food. So I think we should get started. We are going to start by preheating the oven, which I've already done at 425. This is my funky old oven. It has 6 burners. You can't buy these anymore. It's called a crown range. It's very finicky. So I'm preheated to 425. If you haven't preheated yet, just press pause and get your oven up to temp, and then we'll keep going. We're gonna roast the beets, and I'm gonna show you how to prepare for that. Okay, so the oven is preheated. Beets, all you need to do is wash them. They don't even have to be scrubbed too much, just to get those big chunks of dirt off, because we'll peel the skin off. If they have greens on the top, slice them over the root end and save those greens. They could be the greens you're using today. I happen to be using kale because my beets didn't come with greens, but you can also save them for a salad. The tender greens are great in salad, or you can simmer them and put them on rice. You can mix them into pasta. Don't waste the greens. So for the roasted beets, in a piece of foil, wrap it up. And remember, we're using one sheet pan for this whole meal. So I'm gonna put this beet on the sheet pan in the oven, and later the cauliflower and the potato will join. So that'll be about 45 minutes total. Next, we are going to prep the potatoes. So potatoes, I think we call for 2 or 3 potatoes, or 1 potato per person, but a potato like this is too much for this grain bowl. So I'm actually using this big potato for all 3 of us. So just use your judgment in terms of size of potatoes, and just think about how much you actually want to eat. That's really the key in deciding how to make a recipe work. So for this potato, I'm just gonna slice off those little ends. I'm not peeling it because I find the peel to be nutritious and usually really delicious when it gets roasted and toasty. But if you're more of a peeled potato person, now is when you would do it. So I'm gonna cut this potato in half using that tunnel method. That's a great sound. And when cutting pieces for a grain bowl, they don't have to be perfect cubes. Think about what you wanna put in your mouth. How big do you want the pieces to be? I'm gonna make another half cut on each of these. And then I'm just gonna slice them. And they'll be different, they might be different sizes, but that's okay. The bigger ones I might have again. And then we're gonna toss this with some olive oil and a little salt and pepper, just so it has some flavor. When I'm roasting a variety of vegetables, I like to have a toss bowl. So there's the garbage bowl and the toss bowl. And we'll use this a couple of times. So let's just look at the size. I don't know. I actually think these might be okay when they cook and they shrink down a little, so I'm not gonna cut them. But I will put these in this bowl. And then drizzle with a little bit of olive oil. A little bit of salt. And a little bit of pepper. Look at my pepper grinder. Isn't that amazing? I got it in Greece, and I actually bought it at the airport. And I realized I went and I hadn't bought anything. Okay, there's the salt and pepper and olive oil, and this is my toss bowl, so I just toss it to coat. Getting some fat covering all the surfaces that you're gonna roast is going to get you a nicer skin and a more even browning. Okay. Do you hear that sizzling? I'm going to turn these so that none of them are on their sides. Be really careful in here. Okay. The potatoes will take about 20 minutes. Our toss bowl I'll put to the side. And let's talk about the cauliflower. So the cauliflower usually has all these greens on the side, and a lot of people tear these off and discard them. I will tear off and discard the really woody ones or the funky ones, but I actually like to have a little bit of greens, whether it's cauliflower or broccoli, in what I'm eating, especially the tender ones that wrap around the vegetable. They're really delicious and really beautiful also when they're roasted. So that seems to be the funky ones. Maybe a little bit of that one. So to separate cauliflower into florets or little flowers, we're going to cut it in half this way. Look, there's one already. I'm gonna get my toss bowl ready. And we will cut it in half this way. So now you're left with a little bit of stem and the greens we talked about, and then the florets will automatically just come off. I'll show you what I mean. So you can cut off that stem, and I think, especially now more than ever, we don't want to waste food, and these are going to be perfectly delicious roasted. So let's do that next one. This will be really great, that leaf. Now look, the florets are just in there. You can see they're ready to be separated off. There's another one. By cutting that, we get more stem. And then this one can be cut in half. Separate that. Those are ready to go. Sometimes you end up with a big one like this, and you can simply just cut it in half. Little guys can go in. You don't have to have everything the same exact shape and size. When you roast vegetables, and really when you cook anything even on the stovetop, and they're different sizes, what you'll get is a variety of textures, which to me is a good thing. You don't have to have everything to be super precise and the same size. Keep that in mind. It allows you to have a little bit of grace with yourself when you're cooking. All right, stem. This leaf situation that has a woody side, let's tear those in half. Let's speed it up a little bit. All right, we've cut that cauliflower into little florets. I'm gonna go through and make sure there aren't any that are too big. This one feels a little big. Let's cut that one in half. I think we're about ready to toss it. This one too. Okay. Let's cut that one too. Okay. Nice thing about this kitchen is the cutting board is right next to the sink. Look at that. Right into the garbage bowl. Okay, some olive oil. So I like to think of measurements. There's teaspoons, tablespoons, cups, pinch, and then there's the glug. That was a glug. Glug is a scientific kitchen measurement. A little bit of salt. A little bit of pepper, and then let's toss it. Okay. So these will take about 10 or so minutes to roast. So at this point, I'm working pretty quickly, and feel free to take longer. The idea is that you can use one pan in the oven and just keep your eye on it and keep a timer in your head or on your phone or on one of those little dialy things that you might have. And make sure that What you're checking is this. This is the most tender guy, and as far as I'm concerned, when cauliflower is overcooked, it's not the best. The potatoes, they'll take about 20 minutes, and if they're a little overcooked, as long as they're not burnt, totally fine. The beet can roast and roast and roast, and I'll show you what a really, really well, maybe over-roasted beet looks like. It's still delicious inside. Okay, let's get this in the oven. By now you have a heavy sheet pan because you have your beets and your potatoes on it, so you want to be really careful when taking it out of the oven. Maybe plan for a place to set it before you bring your cauliflower or your broccoli or whatnot over. Wow. All right, these potatoes, look at that. These potatoes are already sizzling. I'm actually going to set it here. My cutting board can handle the heat. And what I'm going to do is use some tongs to move the potatoes to one area, and then let's add that broccoli or cauliflower in this case, or rutabaga or turnip or any other cruciferous or root vegetable. And we'll pop this back in. Okay, now that all the vegetables are in the oven that will be roasting, let's turn to a different way of cooking vegetables. We're going to simmer some greens. This is the easiest thing ever. I have some kale, and you could use collards, you could use spinach, you could use any kind of, the beet greens we talked about. And what we're gonna do is simmer them in broth. I have some chicken broth that I made. You can use any kind of broth. You can use packaged broth. You can use better than bouillon mix. At this point, whatever you have, let's use it. If you don't have any of that, you could just use water. I would just add some aromatics to it, like some crushed garlic. You could even saute some onions ahead of time. Definitely some salt and pepper. So we're going to pull the greens off of the kale stems. And we're going to pile them up and just chop them really, really well. The idea here is that we're making kind of a wad of greens that can be placed on top of the grain bowl. And with greens like, whoa, did you see that? With greens like kale that are really sturdy, you can simmer them for a long time as long as it's on low and you have your eye on the level of liquid. You don't want the liquid to cook off completely because if you do that, it'll start to burn. The idea is that they're just simmering, simmering, simmering in liquid to really get them to break down and be soft and flavorful. Okay, chiffonade isn't really in the cards so much. We're still gonna use that concept of chiffonade that we learned in class, but because this is super curly kale, it's kind of all over the place, but I'm still gonna make a loose stack. The little guys will just chop in there with the rest of the big guys. But the big guys, let's kind of line them up. And then these little guys, let's tackle after. And then you're going to roll it up into a burrito and then really thin. Do you see? That's maybe ½ an inch, maybe less. Isn't that the most beautiful thing? Look at that pinwheel of kale. So I'm just shimmying my fingers down the line until this is all chopped. And then these miscellaneous little guys, just gonna kind of wad it up. Same thing, just thin slices. Okay, so I'm using a cup of stock. You can tell it's homemade, it's settled. A cup of stock that I will heat in a skillet. I'm using a cast iron skillet. I'm just gonna heat that up until it's simmering. Once it's simmering, I will put these greens in and just let them bubble away on a very, very low heat, and I will keep my eye on it and make sure that it's not burning and that there's enough liquid. You just keep adding liquid if it cooks off. You can add water. I might have a little bit more chicken stock, but if I don't, I'll just add some water, and then I will taste for some salt at the end. Just, you don't want it to have no flavor, but my chicken stock is salted, so the flavor will come from there, hopefully. Okay, so while we're waiting for the broth to come to a simmer, why not cut the avocado? We did this 2 weeks ago in the sushi lesson, so you guys should know by now how to do it. Remember, hit the pit, open it up like this. That's a beautiful avocado. I have 3 people I'm cooking for, and I would say a whole avocado that's this size is the right amount for 3 people. But for the sake of just reviewing with you how you can cut it, I'm going to set this half aside. So many ways to cut an avocado. You could even just make a mash, almost like a guacamole to put on your grain bowl, but since this is a nice, perfectly ripe, pretty firm avocado, I'm gonna do the slices like this. They're gonna make sure the tip of the knife is tracing the bottom. I'm not poking through, I'm not cutting myself, but I'm just making these lines that go straight across. And then I'm gonna cut it again this way. And then when it's time to assemble our grain bowl, I'm just gonna scoop it out. So for now, I'll put it back on that avocado to cap it and keep it nice and fresh. I think I hear the broth simmering. Yep. Let's plop that in. Give it a stir and lower the heat. I'm cooking with gas, which this is a first for the Dynamite shop, and it's what you'll see me cooking with as long as we're quarantined. So turning it to low. I'm going to let that simmer for a little while. And I have some more broth here, which I'll use for the grains, but I can also put that in there and then replace with water for the grains. Okay. All right, so now it's time to make the grain. The grain is the foundation for this meal. The first step is to get the water or the broth going. I'm cooking for 3 people, and I know I'll need a cup of liquid to 1/3 cup of quinoa. And so I have 3 cups of broth back here. You can use broth, water, or a combination. I'm actually using a combo. And we're just gonna pour that in. And bring that to a boil. And I have my 1 cup of quinoa. Since there's 3 of us, 1/3 dry makes 1 serving. And so I have 1 whole cup. I've rinsed it and the water is running clear. So once my broth has come to a boil, I can just add this in, bring it back up to a boil, and lower the heat to a simmer and cover. We're waiting for the water and the broth to boil for the quinoa. Let's do a check-in on everything else we have going. We have vegetables in the oven roasting, and we have those simmering greens on the stove. Let's check what's happening in the oven first. This looks really good. Beautiful. So, have you heard the term fork tender? If you put your fork in something and it falls right off, it's done. I think those are done. The cauliflower, it feels like it could use another minute, and the beet still has a ways to go. So I'm gonna take these potatoes off so they stop cooking, and I'll put everything else back in just to finish off this cauliflower and to give the beets some more time. The other thing we should check up on are those greens, because I'm starting to hear a louder simmering sound, so I have a feeling that some of that liquid is cooking off. And indeed, that is the case. So I'm gonna add a little more liquid, just water this time. And look what I noticed. Our broth is boiling, so let's get that quinoa in there. Once you get the grains in, you want to bring it back to a boil. Remember, the grains are cooler, so they bring down the overall temperature. once that's boiling, we will lower the temperature and cover it with a tight-fitting lid, and that will take just about 10 minutes. Okay, so while that's going on the stove, while the quinoa is cooking, the greens are simmering, and our remaining vegetables are roasting, let's make this really simple dressing. It's a tahini dressing. So it has tahini, which is sesame paste. It has lemon juice, and it has salt, and you'll see there's also a magic ingredient, warm water. You'll see why we need it. So I'm making enough just for tonight because I picked a small jam jar, but you can make extras. You can use it on other salads. I love dipping vegetables in it. So in this, I have 3 tablespoons of tahini. And tahini really needs to be mixed up before you measure it. It will separate, kind of like peanut butter does sometimes. Then we'll put 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. You'll see that it makes it seize up, which is why we need warm water. It's the magic ingredient that kind of breaks it out. Notice I'm not measuring, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. If you want to measure it, you can, of course. You need about 2 tablespoons. I'm going to go with that being about 2 tablespoons. I think it's about a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm also going to eyeball that. And then we'll use this fork to mix that up. You can also use a whisk, and you'll see when I mix it up, it's kind of going to get stiff. And it's not like a dressing anymore. It's back to being like a paste. So that's where we add the warm water. Let me get my sink going. And you really just want a drizzle. And you want to drizzle it in while mixing until it's the consistency you want. Okay, here we go. I'm even going to slow it down. Show you what that's looking like. Looking more dressing-like to me. All right, I think that's it. Now the funny thing that happens is if you make this dressing ahead of time, with the warm water, it gets to the consistency you want, and then you put it in the fridge overnight, it's gonna do the same thing. So then, if you keep adding warm water, you have to taste for flavor because of course the water dilutes it. So right now I'm gonna taste our dressing. That tastes really good. This lemon is very flavorful. Keep in mind you also can add pepper, more salt. You could add, if you want more of a lemony flavor, some lemon zest, but I'm gonna say this is good to go. So I'll put that to the side, and that'll be part of assembling our grain bowls. All right, I think I hear some sizzling. It sounds like cauliflower to me. Let's see how that cauliflower is doing. Oh yeah. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Nice and toasty. Look at those greens. Aren't you glad we made those? Okay. We're gonna move these to this bowl. Go! That out. This beet still feels pretty hard to me. I say for this recipe, this method, look for smaller beets because they'll cook faster and you'll be in better shape. You can also cut them in half and roast them. The only thing that does is it makes the cut side exposed to heat, so it gets a little shriveling. It doesn't have that nice, kind of almost meaty, smooth consistency, but it will happen faster. All right, I'm putting this back in the oven and it'll be done by the time we are ready to eat. Our greens are still simmering, so while those continue to simmer, let's make the sparkles. Okay, so sparkles call for 1/3 cup of toasted coconut flakes or shredded coconut. We will toast them now. 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds toasted. We'll toast these together. You need a lime to zest, which you will hold back the zest if you're making enough of this to last you through a few meals. Salt and something spicy if you like it. I love smoked paprika, so we'll use this. You could also use cayenne. So I like to toast things in a cast iron skillet, and I'll be toasting these together for efficiency. You just have to keep a really sharp eye on things like this when you're toasting them on the stovetop or in the oven so that you don't burn them. For something this small, I prefer to use the stovetop because I can watch it. I don't have to keep opening the oven. If you're toasting like a huge tray of nuts or something, that's good for the oven. But for today, we're just gonna do it in a cast iron skillet. This size will work pretty well. And what I'll do is get it hot first and then add these. So my skillet is preheated. By the way, I heated it on medium. You don't want it to get scalding hot because it'll burn, and you need to leave the option open for lowering it down. So keep your eye on it. You don't want things to burn. We'll do the 1/3 of a cup of coconut chips and 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. And I'm just going to agitate the pan over the heat. This should take, it really depends on what kind of pan you use and what level of heat you're at, but it should take 3 to 4 minutes. The coconut is a really good gauge because it's so bright white and it burns so easily that you can really see when it starts turning color that you're pretty much done. So don't take your eye off of it. You see we're starting to get some color on that coconut, a little bit of the flakes. There's also a major nose aspect to this. You really know when things are almost done. So we're getting some more color on the seeds as well. Okay, this is definitely ready. It smells really good. Look at that nice color. We're going to put it in the bowl that we'll eventually serve it from. So, scraping it in. Now remember, if you're making this to eat today, put all the lime zest in. If you're making a big batch that you might save to use other days, save some to the side that you'll save for another day and don't put the lime in. I'm gonna eat all of this today, so I'm doing the lime. So the lime amounts really, we say 1/4 teaspoon, but honestly, I say zest until you feel like you like the color of it. The green adds this really beautiful pop, as does the red. So I'm gonna zest this lime. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Now remember, zesting, you only zest until you see the white, no further. Once you see white, stop. Because that pith does not have the flowery, fragrant, beautiful flavor that the zest does where the color is. Okay. Boy, does that smell good. Now at this point, I hope it goes without saying, you're not throwing this lime away. This lime has many more lives. Now, the last bit we need is a little bit of paprika and some salt. I'm gonna put, I like spicy food. So does my family. I'm gonna put about that much. Smoked paprika, by the way, isn't even that spicy, but if you're dealing in cayenne, you might be careful. So I'm putting that much smoked paprika and about the same salt. And I don't know if it's in the recipe, but I'm gonna add a little pepper too, just because I love pepper. So this is the sparkles. This makes dishes sparkle. That's why it's called that. Okay. So this, I wish you could smell it. Because it's still hot, a lot of the scent is still coming out. It is so tasty. So that will go on our grain bowl. So let's check in with the greens and the grains. I have a feeling they are both close to done. If I look at my watch that I'm not wearing, We're about 10 minutes into the quinoa. Now, by the way, about those times are estimates, and what you're really looking for is the water to be absorbed. So let's see. Yep. Okay, absolutely perfect. The water is absorbed. I don't know if you can see that with all the steam. Okay, I'm not going to disturb this too much. I'm now taking it off the heat, putting the cover back on, and letting it sit. Let's check in with these greens. They look pretty simmered. Like I said, you could simmer these as long as there's still liquid in it for an hour. What I'm going to do is raise the heat to cook off this extra moisture I added, this extra broth, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, the only thing left is the beet, and I'm going to pull that out of the oven and give it a minute to cool off before I start handling it. Okay. Inside is a delicious, perfectly roasted beet. We'll let it cool off. Okay. I think this is ready to go. Foil, by the way, can be reused. I'm going to rinse this off. I'm not putting it in the trash. Okay, so the way to deal with this beet is, because of the roasting, look what's happened to the skin. This is my favorite thing to do. The skin is all squidgy and moves around, and it'll peel right off. You'll get really, really red hands, but that's okay. So what I do first is I slice off that root end. Look, it's peeling itself. Look at that. I actually do feel a little bit of grit on the outside, but it's all coming off. And I'm going to wash my hands. So there's no grit left. Okay. So for the grain bowl, just like everything else, slice or cut your vegetable into a shape and size that you want to eat. There's no hard and fast rule. You could do pieces like this, really thin pieces, and you could layer them really beautifully across the top of your grain bowl, or you could cut it into chunks. I think that's what I'm going to do. But there's no hard and fast rules. Okay. Look at those beautiful beets. Oh my God, it's like candy. It shouldn't be dinner. Okay, I think the last thing to tend to is the greens. Let's pull them off the stove. Those greens are done. We're gonna put them in a bowl here to create our grain bowl customization bar. Okay, now let's bring out the quinoa. It's been sitting, and we will fluff it with a spoon or a fork. I just want to review the way we do grains. You use the ratio in the chart that we included in your lesson plan. In this case, quinoa is 1/3 cup of quinoa to 1 cup of water per serving. And a serving in this case is 1 cup, which is it's a fair amount of quinoa. You can knock it back a bit if you're just serving it as a side dish. And you bring water or broth, 1 cup to every 1/3 cup of quinoa, to a boil. You make sure that your grain is rinsed until the water runs clear. And then you add the rinsed grains to the boiling liquid. When it comes back up to a boil, lower it to a simmer and place a tight-fitting lid on top. You'll cook it for the time in the chart with an eye on checking it on the lower end. If I give a range, check it on the lower end. The idea is that the water or the broth, any kind of liquid you're using, is absorbed. Once it's absorbed, it should be done. Check for doneness, of course, but then turn the flame off, replace the lid, keep the lid on, and let it sit for at least 5 minutes, if not 10. Once that's done, and that's the step we're at now, you take the lid off and you give it a fluffing. Oh, that smells so good and healthy. Okay, smells so good. So I usually let everyone assemble their own grain bowl as long as they can be trusted with selecting the nutritious items, which in this case is really everything. But a balance of color is really important. But I'm just gonna make mine right now. So you need a wide, low bowl. And what you'll do is you'll start with the grain. We budgeted, remember, for about a cup of grains. Now, you can either spread it along the bottom as a foundation, or you can have it as one of the elements to the side. I kind of like a combination of the two. So I'm gonna put about a cup of grains there, of quinoa. And I'm going to select definitely some sweet potatoes. You know what I love about beets? Do you see that? It's like a relic. It'll go away eventually. I can probably even get it off in the first cleaning tonight, but it's just this beautiful evidence that we made beets. Okay, let's do some cauliflower. And I'm definitely going for some of those stems because they're just so beautiful. Really nice color in this cauliflower. Really want this piece right there. So pretty. Okay, and let's do some beets right there. And some of these simmered greens. Nice wad of those. That looks really nice. And let's get some avocado. Borrow this spoon. And I budgeted for about 1/3 of a whole avocado per person, but you can decide how much you want to use. Fan that across. And then I'm getting to the condiment area. I'm going to use this pickled mix. It's from Hawthorne Valley Farm, which is a really beautiful farm upstate. Some pickled cabbage, ginger, carrots. I'm going to put that on the side as a little thing that I can mix in. And some chopped cilantro. You could also do chopped Italian parsley. You could do basil if you have it. If it's more, really the herbs are about the flavor profile that feels right to this dish. For me, cilantro feels right, but you can really do anything. Now is the big moment, the sparkles. Let's make sure I'm getting my fair share of all the different sparkles. And then I'm going to drizzle the tahini dressing just in one kind of circle. I also like to keep it to the side to add more if needed. Hot sauce, don't forget it. Just a couple little dabs here and there. Boop, 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 boop. Now that is something that, after a long day of online learning, missing my friends, feeling all cooped up, this bowl of food is going to make me just a little bit happier. And it really feels like a reminder of the brightness that's to come, the way we're kind of all in this together, the choices that we still have, that we still can control some things, and just that there's, it's one more day. We're one day closer to the end of this thing, which is something my mom texted me, and I've been reminding myself of that every day. So I'm really grateful for this meal, and I'm really grateful for you guys cooking along with us. I hope this video was really helpful. I hope you used it, you paused, you used the timestamps, and we can't wait to see you in class this week. So enjoy your healthy grain bowl, and good for you for cooking for your family. See you next time.